Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're looking at the phenomenon we're calling the Teflon Donald, the Republican frontrunner for president. Donald Trump, who every time has courted scandal along the way since he announced his candidacy last summer, and yet is still the frontrunner for the Republican nomination. With us, the former chair of Republicans abroad here in Paris, Stuart Haugen, French political scientist Jean-Éric Brana, author of Who Wants to Destroy the Republican Party, The Astonishing Donald Trump, published in French, but you're saying there's an ebook. There's an ebook version in English. Okay, that's good to know. And joining us from Washington is Josh Krashour, political editor for the National Journal, who pens the weekly Against the Grain column. Josh, full disclosure here, how do reporters feel about the way they're treated at Trump rallies? You know, there's that cordon to keep the reporters from the supporters of the candidate.
It's difficult, and having covered about a half dozen Trump campaign rallies myself, I don't think it's a hostile work environment, but it's harder to talk to voters. It's harder to interview the candidate. He doesn't do interviews as other candidates occasionally do. And it's just, you know, when I was at an event in Florida right before the Florida primary, and the advisory that the Trump campaign put out says, come if you're a media before 6:30 and you'll get in. I was there 20 minutes before and they blocked all media access to the event. So I ended up just going through the regular general entrance and ended up interviewing more people and talking to more Trump supporters than I ever would have if I was actually in the press pen, where a lot of the reporters are penned off and distanced from the crowd and a lot of the Trump supporters. So, you know, and National Public Radio, one of the big outlets here in the United States, tried to offer a set of guidelines to its reporters on how to cover a Trump event. I don't think it's gotten quite that far. I think you just have to know the type of environment you're in. It's not, there's been these protests at some of these events that have gotten a little rowdy, but by and large, it's just about using some common sense and trying to get around some of the restrictions that the Trump campaign has implemented.
Yeah, hostile environment training. You're saying they went too far over at National Public Radio. Jean-Éric Brana, is it any different? Here in France, you know, here at France 24, we had one of our reporters a few years back roughed up at a National Front event. So is it any different, really?
I don't know. I've been to one of Trump's rally as well. I've been there in Georgia. I was not a journalist, so I could get in very easily and be on the front. I would say, very close to the candidate. I was very surprised because personally I didn't notice anything hostile. This is something I would like to say. I think it's important because from a French point of view, we see this candidate as an hostile person with journalists. And I heard when he said, oh, those journalists and all the people booed. But for me, it was just a game. Those people didn't appear to be hostile. It was just before the event we had, just after the violence that came after. Remember, Georgia was just after the South Carolina primary. Everything was quiet at this moment. But really, it was great fun, I would say. You know, it was like a fun show. It was very surprising, very different from the other rallies I've been to. I attended the Rubio's rally and Hillary Clinton's. That was very different. That was very political. That was not with Trump. Nothing is really political with Trump. You know, he talked about Trump, and a little bit about politics. And the people were shouting for 2 hours, were singing sometimes, really nothing political. That's something I would like to say. So when the journalists say it was very difficult, personally, I talked to many people in the public and asked them about their opinion. I had no problem with that.
Josh Krashour, does that ring true that there isn't all that much politics at a Trump rally?
Well, it's definitely true that a lot of people are there just to see the whole Trump spectacle. I was at an event in Boca Raton a couple of weeks ago in Florida, and there were about 6,000 people at an amphitheater, 70-degree weather, and the Rolling Stones were blaring from the loudspeakers. You could have been at a concert as much as a political rally. And frankly, when Trump started speaking, and in the first 10 minutes of his speech, several hundred people were actually leaving for the exits. They wanted to be, they were Trump supporters. They were going to vote for him no matter what, but they weren't there to hear him speak. They didn't care what he had to say. They were there just to kind of show their support and kind of send a message of this anti-establishment mood that we're seeing across the country. So Trump's speech wasn't what they were there for. They were there just to be a part of this whole huge rally, the events that are unlike any other presidential candidate, with the possible exception of Bernie Sanders and the rallies that the number of people he's been able to get at his rallies. So you find a lot of people that aren't even registered voters in the states that Trump is holding the rallies in. They just want to be part of the whole scene. So this is more of a cultural phenomenon as much as a political phenomenon in the United States.
And this brings us to a key point, doesn't it, Stuart Haugen? Donald Trump, famous to some as a real estate mogul, but famous to a lot of others because he was a star of a reality TV show, a Celebrity Apprentice, with the catchphrase, "You're fired," at the end of each episode. Is that a good thing or a bad thing that somebody who's done reality TV is the front runner? Is that how
I don't know
politics?
if it's a good or a bad thing.
Well, is it the way politics is becoming?
Yes.
That we're treating politics. Is politics like a reality TV show where you eliminate the candidates one by one?
Let's go back to 2008,
Yeah.
and let's start with how Barack Obama won an election that coming out of nowhere. He won by bridging that gap between the traditional media and social media. He revolutionized campaigning and politics in social media, and he destroyed his competition. What is happening here, whether it will pan out the same way or not, is that Donald Trump is bridging that gap between social media and reality television and reality.
But is it a
video.
good thing?
I don't know if it's a good thing.
Come on, you must have thought about this.
No, let me state absolutely that I don't think what happened with Obama nor what's happening with Trump is a good thing. I think the best thing is when I would love to see virtually no money in politics so that people who want to vote went out and found out what their candidate had to say, decided how they match up to it, and then made a decision. Because I think all of the hype and all of the subterfuge and all of the viral this and that and the gadgets and the memes online, I don't think it is a good thing. But it is reality, Frank.
All right, you mentioned that this way that people are communicating. Oscar Wilde once said, "The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about." And we could show you a study that runs to the end of last month that certainly proves it in the case of Donald Trump. Till the end of February, he had spent $10 million on his campaign, but enjoyed close to $2 billion of media coverage. There you see Trump with the big red block there of media attention. And when Jean-Éric Branagh, when we said we were going to be discussing Donald Trump again in the France 24 debate, some said, "Oh, you're just giving him free publicity."
And you are. You're part of the show because you are talking about Donald Trump. I think he wishes France 24 could be watching the United States. That's a coverage for...
We are?
Of course you are, but I mean, all the time. That's amazing. From the beginning, remember the 16th of June, he started his campaign saying, "I want to build a wall because those dumb Mexicans, can I say so, are
I didn't say
rapists."
That. I didn't say that.
They are rapists. They are nasty people. It was on the headlines, on the next page. It was on the front pages. What had happened the day before? The day before, on the 15th of June, Jeb Bush had declared his candidacy. Nobody talked about that. And this was the case for the rest of the campaign. Every week, as I said previously, he said something nasty about women or Muslims, whatever. And he occupied the front page of the newspapers, the TV shows and whatever. That was a fantastic strategy. He knew how to capture the attention of the media. There's something I did not really agree with you, Stuart, when you said...
I'm shocked.
Yeah, I know you are. You said that his strategy was to fill the gap between the social medias and the traditional medias.
No. Social media and reality TV.
Not only. You are part of the show. We are all part of the show.
Well, that's the whole thing about reality TV.
Show.
We think we're in that living room with those people when that's happening.
Yeah. What is a reality show? It is a show when the candidate speaks about whatever he's got in mind. There is no filter.
Well, no,
and Donald Trump
unfiltered,
is like that.
but fully scripted. let me say that the actual language used is unfiltered, but the flow of all of these things is fully scripted. And anybody who thinks that Donald Trump is not fully scripted,
exactly, yes, it is.
but the language he uses varies, is making
That's
a mistake.
the same.
It's like every reality
I
TV
think
show
everything is scripted with Donald
yeah.
Trump, and there is no filter in the language used.
All right, Josh Krashauer, what will be Hillary Clinton's answer to that in the fall should she win the nomination?
Well, the big question for Hillary Clinton is, does she move to the mid? If Trump is the Republican nominee, does she find that she has a lot of running room to the middle and decide to pivot to the center and basically try to build up support at a high level and try to win over
Josh,
some of these
whether she
disaffected-
goes to the middle or the left or whatever, how is she going to counter the one outrageous statement a day to catch the attention of the media?
Well, look what she's done so far. She's tried to ignore Trump personally as much as possible, though she's condemned and criticized Trumpism and sort of the darker criticisms that he's offered throughout his campaign. But to be honest, I don't think she'd be, I mean, the Hillary Clinton campaign wants to face Donald Trump. I mean, they see the polls like we do. They have their own internals, and they know that she doesn't want to get into a nasty mud fight with Donald Trump. She's going to try to avoid that at every opportunity. But when you look at her own poor favorable numbers, yet her lead, her double-digit lead in most polls against Donald Trump, she knows she has a real opportunity not just to build up a sizable win in the November general election, but to bring aboard a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House as well.
Sorry, hang on, Josh, because I still don't understand this. So she wants to let him continue to, as they say, suck the air in the room, but she thinks that with that she's going to win the election?
Well, look, she's actually gaining ground as the Republican campaign has gone on against Donald Trump. She's a very weak candidate generally, but she's actually gaining ground when you look at the head-to-head matchups against Donald Trump. And you look at the poll numbers we've been talking about, where Trump's favorability is in the 20s and his unfavorability is in the 60s and 70s. I mean, that's a dream matchup for Hillary Clinton.
Well, her unfavorability is approaching 60% too, though, isn't it, Josh?
It's about 10 points lower, the unfavorability numbers.
We're into unfettered.
So you're talking about two of the least popular candidates, and Ted
in
Cruz,
history,
who's not that well liked himself, and any other Republican leads Clinton in many of these head-to-head matchups. Trump has consistently trailed, usually by double digits, against Donald Trump. And again, we've never seen any major party nominee enter a general election with unfavorability numbers in the 60s, approaching 70%. Right. So I don't think Hillary Clinton, behind the scenes, she is not too worried about Donald Trump as far as a general election matchup is concerned.
But we remember in 2008, part of Barack Obama's success was he had this whole team of crisis management guys, and every time there was an attack, they countered the attack within minutes because they knew that the news cycle now has become so instantaneous. How's Hillary Clinton going to deal with Donald Trump?
Well, the same rapid response team there were veterans of the Bill Clinton operation. Some of them are still around, and they're working for Clinton's campaign.
Well, they certainly didn't do a very good job in 2008.
It's more about preventing, you saw what happened when Donald Trump attacked Bill Clinton's, the sex scandals of the 90s. And I think that's the key Clinton's going to have to worry about personal mud being smeared and personal attacks affecting her overall image and maybe Bill Clinton's image if Trump is a nominee. Trump is certainly unpredictable. You never know where he's going to go, and it's going to be a fight. He's going to try to make it a fight into the mud with Hillary Clinton. But as far as the general election and the politics of a general election go, Clinton can breathe pretty easy if Trump is her Republican opponent.
Now, here's one of the odd things about this election, and it's, I guess, virtually unprecedented in recent times. On certain policy matters, you've got the Republican candidate who, on trade, is a protectionist, in this case, Donald Trump, and the Democratic candidate, Hillary Clinton, who's more free market. Does that confuse Republicans?
It depends on who you talk to. Obviously, the establishment in the party is confused and offended and upset because the people aren't listening. The real underlying issue here is in 2012, after the loss of Romney, the party did its notorious autopsy of the outcomes. The number one conclusion they drew was that the party establishment should stay the heck out of determining who the candidate should be and let the people choose. Now we are in the midst, and this is possibly, if you want to talk about who's going to destroy the Republican Party, should it happen, I mean, I tend to go with Newt Gingrich, who says we're in transition, we're not in destruction mode, but maybe wishful thinking. The problem right now is you've got a whole bunch of people trying to plot and decide who the people will have the opportunity to vote for, even though they've expressed
All right,
their
but let's
wish.
assume Donald Trump is the nominee.
All right.
At that point in time, it's going to be awkward, isn't it, for a lot of Republicans who, for them, free trade has been a mantra. They will be supporting the protectionist candidate against Hillary Clinton.
That may well be, but at the same point in time, a lot of Democrats, blue collar workers, and that have seen their jobs disappear to Mexico and the Far East, may well support Trump. Now, we all know in reality the vast majority of those jobs aren't coming back. But in typical fashion, politics is not really about what's going to happen. It's about what people believe could happen if they vote the right way. I think there's a big chance that the total constituencies may be reshuffled here in this election. I don't know if Trump can win or not, but I certainly would not completely block him out of that.
Attending those rallies, did you have this sense that United States politics and the people who stand behind the two big parties is changing in a seismic manner?
Bernie Sanders asked for a revolution. I think Donald Trump made the revolution. And in the Republican Party right now, there is a big change. There is no more ideology. There is no more ideology in a candidate like Donald Trump. He's got no ideology at all. This man is not a conservative. This is repeated from the beginning. And you know what? His supporters don't care. As Stuart said, and I do agree, they are sensible to the fact that he promised to give back the jobs. This is the only thing they can hear from the candidate, nothing else. What is very striking is that all the classical themes of the conservatives were not used in this campaign. They will not be in the future either, because in front of Hillary Clinton, of course, is not going to use that. But the establishment has got a possibility with Donald Trump that they don't have with Ted Cruz. It is to influence what he's going to say in the future. Because I don't really agree with Josh when he said, maybe there will be a contested convention. I think it would be very easy for Donald Trump to win the nomination. Because in the future, Ted Cruz has no room. There is only Nebraska, Dakota, and maybe New Mexico to win, and that's it. The big states are for Donald Trump, New York and California in particular, and the Super Tuesday. That would be very easy for him to win. And after that, the big thing will be to unite the party. And of course, there is a strong sense of winning in the Republican Party. They all want this presidency. They are all going to back Donald Trump, and maybe not the big leaders were old leaders like Romney, McCain, or Jeb Bush. For them, they will be put aside. But all the others, and in particular the senators who have their seats, are to play in the game on the 8th of November, will back Donald Trump. There is no other way for them. So I think the party will unite, and they will influence Donald Trump in his strategy and in his speech in the future.
Donald Trump, less of a maverick than he claims?
He's a pragmatist. He's a populist and a pragmatist.
So you agree with Jean-Éric that in the end the establishment would prefer a Trump to a Cruz?
I'm not sure they know. They're one side they're telling themselves that if we go with Trump, it's a certain loss and we'll be devastated all the way down the line, down the ticket. And yet, on the other hand, some part of them think that he will just rip Hillary Clinton apart with his devastating counterattacks and approach. And she has certainly enough to be worried about in her history that this would be interesting.
Josh Kraushaar, do you have a better sense than a couple of months back of what Donald Trump actually stands for?
Well, I don't think a lot of Republicans on Capitol Hill or Republican elected officials do. I mean, if Trump truly was the front runner and was truly the favorite to win the nomination without a contested convention, he'd have a lot more endorsements from members of Congress, from governors, from elected officials who want to jump on that bandwagon and get an early line to cabinet spots and jobs in a Trump presidency, but that's slowed to a trickle since Chris Christie offered his endorsement several weeks ago. So you have very, very few members of the House and Senate that have jumped on the Trump bandwagon, even though Trump has won a decent, the majority of the states that have voted so far. And as far as the calendar goes, Wisconsin, if the polls are correct, Cruz was probably going to get the lion's share, if not all of the delegates out of Wisconsin. You have Indiana, another big state coming up in May, which is likely going to follow the lead of Wisconsin. It's very demographically similar. And also you have to pay attention to the thresholds. Even in Trump-friendly states like New York and Connecticut, Trump would need to win 50% of the statewide vote or the vote into the congressional districts to really get a lion's share of delegates, the most delegates out of a delegate-rich state like New York. That applies to California as well, where he's not doing quite as well. So if you look at the math, if you actually run the numbers, Trump is less likely than more likely is probably only has about a 35-40% chance to actually get the majority of delegates.
But Josh, let me just ask you this. Just let me ask you this. If it does then come to where Donald Trump doesn't have the majority of votes when they go to the convention, does the Republican Party risk having what happened to the Democrats back in 1968, where it basically implodes in front of everyone's eyes on the convention floor?
Well, you're going to have an implosion and chaos no matter what. I think 68 is actually a very good comparison. I mean, that was an election where Hubert Humphrey wasn't running in most of the Democratic primaries that year, but he ended up winning the nomination on the floor. He was the establishment pick, and he ended up almost beating Richard Nixon when all was said and done. It was a very close race where Humphrey gained steam at the very end. I think you could see a similar dynamic on the Republican side, where Cruz or even someone else winning the nomination, even if Trump has the most delegates when we get to the convention. But Hillary Clinton's unfavorability and her unpopularity will automatically guarantee a pretty close race. I mean, as I said before, what's remarkable is that Clinton has particularly bad favorability numbers, but Trump has historically bad numbers. He's one of the few Republicans that can almost give Democrats a big win, while Cruz or even any of the other, Kasich or even an outsider that could come in at the last minute, they would at least be in a toss-up and might even be favored in a general election matchup against Hillary Clinton.
Suspense till November, predicts Josh Kraushaar. Many thanks for joining us from Washington. I want to thank as well Stuart Haugen and Jean-Éric Brana. Stay with us. Our Media Watch segment's next. And we say hello to James Green.
Hi, François. Just a quick look at criticism for the media for their role in creating the Trump monster, which is perhaps unfair for those who don't think he is a monster, but that's what some people are saying, right? So we have had Barack Obama scolding the media. This was on Monday evening when he was speaking at a keynote speech, and he scolded the Fourth Estate, according to Politico.com, saying that they have sort of given an uncritical platform to divisive and vulgar rhetoric from, he didn't specifically mention Trump, but it was pretty clear who he was talking about, in part because of relentless economic pressures that have changed the way news organizations operate. Now, that echoes criticisms in the New York Times by Nicholas Kristof saying, "My shared shame, the media helped make Trump." Now, he quotes Ann Curry, who is the former Today anchor, who says this: "Trump is not just an instant rating goldmine, he is the mother lode." And she goes on to say in that piece, "He stepped on the presidential campaign stage precisely at a moment when the media was struggling with deep insecurities about their financial stability. The truth is the media needed Trump like a crack addict needed a hit." So in other words, they're painting a picture really of a completely disproportionate time being given to Donald Trump because he made good television, because he was saying a lot of crazy things. And the New York Times even did an analysis of that, concluding that they gave Donald Trump $1.9 billion in free publicity in this presidential cycle. Because basically they were just putting the camera on him, putting the microphone in his face and letting him go a little bit mad. Others don't agree with that, such as Eugene Robinson, writing for the Washington Post, saying, no, the media didn't create Trump. It's in a free market media environment. The media are competing with each other for the best ratings, and actually this is what audiences are looking for. And he goes on to say as well that the mainstream media is about as popular amongst the Republican base as the Zika virus, and the one exception, Fox News, has been tougher on Trump than other outlets. So perhaps it's not as clean-cut as all that. Anyway, on the other side of the spectrum, you've got satire. This is in the Borowitz report in the New Yorker, talking about coverage of Bernie Sanders. Not quite the same situation where, well, I suppose he's getting coverage, but there seems to be a consensus that it's not realistic that he'll get the nomination.
And not to his strong showing in Washington State.
That's right. He's been doing well in the Western primaries, but there still seems to be a degree of consensus, according to the satirical take on it anyway, that he's just got no hope at all, even if he's getting 70%, 80%.
All right.
Forget about it.
Many thanks, James Creed. I
François.
want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24.